12-year-old girl, British-born Madeline McCann, went missing from a rented apartment while her parents were having dinner nearby.
The disappearance of a child is always disturbing, but this case has become an international sensation. Millions of people around the world followed every update, every clue, every turn of events. Kate and Jerry McCann met in 1993 in Glasgow, where they both worked as doctors. Jerry, born in 1968, specialized in cardiology, while Kate, born in 1967, worked as a general practitioner and later focused on anesthesiology. The couple married in 1998 after 5 years of dating. After several years of trying to conceive and undergoing IVF procedures, their long-awaited daughter, Madeleine McCann, was born on May 12, 2003. The girl was born healthy, with a distinctive feature in her right eye, a coloboma of the iris, which caused her pupil to have an unusual shape, resembling a black slit at the bottom of the iris. The McCann's family life was going well. After Madeleine's birth, they moved to a 2-story house in the small town of Rothley in Leicestershire. 2 years later, in February 2005, the couple had twins, Sean and Amelie. By the time of her disappearance, Madeleine was a cheerful, active child who loved playing with her younger brother and sister, enjoyed swimming, and attended preschool. She was known for being sociable, having a bright personality, and being curious. Family videos and photographs captured Madeleine smiling, indicating a happy childhood in a loving family. In early 2007, the McCann family led an ordinary middle-class life in the United Kingdom. Both parents continued working as doctors, balancing their careers with raising 3 children. Nothing foreshadowed the tragedy that would forever change their lives. In spring 2007, Kate and Jerry McCann, along with 3 other family friends, planned a joint vacation in Portugal. The group of 9 adults, later dubbed the Tapas 9 by the press, included David and Fiona Payne with their 2 children, Jane Tanner and Russell O'Brien with their 2 daughters, and Matthew and Rachel Oldfield with 1 child. All of them, like the McCanns, were highly educated middle-aged professionals. For their vacation, they chose the Ocean Club Resort in the small coastal town of Praia da Luz in southern Portugal, located in the Algarve, a popular tourist region. The resort offered apartments for families with children, kids clubs, swimming pools, and restaurants. On April 27, 2007, the McCann family arrived with their children in Praia da Luz. They were given apartment 5A on the first floor of a 2-story building on Rua Agostinho da Silva. The apartment was located on the corner of the building, with doors and windows facing both the street and the resort grounds. Importantly, the back sliding door of the apartment leading to the terrace was easily accessible from the street. The Ocean Club Resort offered nanny and childcare services, but the McCanns and their friends decided to organize their own system for checking on the children. They had dinner every evening at the Tapas restaurant, located approximately 50 meters from the apartments, across the swimming pool. From this point, the adults could not directly see their apartments due to shrubbery and a wall. During their stay at the resort, the group established a certain daily routine. In the morning, they would have breakfast, then the children would attend a kids club while the adults engaged in sports or relaxed by the pool. After lunch, parents would pick up their children and spend time together. In the evening, after putting the children to bed around 7:30, the adults would meet for dinner at the Tapas restaurant around 8:30. During dinner, the parents would take turns checking on the sleeping children every 30 minutes. This system had been established from the first day of the vacation and worked without incidents until the fateful evening of May 3rd. May 3rd, 2007, began as a typical vacation day for the McCann family. The morning and day proceeded according to the established routine. Madeleine, along with her brother and sister, attended the kids club, played by the pool, and around 2:30 in the afternoon, the family returned to their apartment for rest. In the late afternoon, Kate and the children stayed in the room while Jerry played tennis. Around 5:30, The children visited the evening playground, and then the whole family returned to apartment 5A around 6 o'clock. Kate bathed the children, after which they had dinner and prepared for bed. Kate and Jerry read the children a story and put them to bed at approximately 7:30. Madeline slept in the children's room on her bed, with the twins in their cribs next to her. After this, the parents showered and changed for dinner. Around 8:30, Jerry and Kate left the apartment through the sliding glass door on the back terrace, which, according to them, they left locked from the inside. They also locked the front door. They headed to the tapas restaurant, where they met with their other 7 friends. The first check on the children was performed by Jerry McCann around 9:05. He entered the apartment through the front door using a key and made sure all 3 children were asleep. According to him, he noticed that the door to the children's room was open wider than when they had left, but he didn't think much of it. As he was leaving the apartment, Jerry met fellow vacationer Jeremy Wilkins, with whom he briefly spoke on the street. At 9:15, Matthew Oldfield was scheduled to check in, and he offered to check not only his own children, but also the McCanns. According to him, he entered apartment 5A through the unlocked back sliding door but didn't enter the children's room, just listened from the doorway. He didn't notice anything unusual and returned to the restaurant. At 10 o'clock, it was Kate McCann's turn to check on the children. Upon entering the apartment, she immediately noticed that the door to the children's room was again open wider than usual. Entering, Kate discovered that Madeline's bed was empty. She checked the bathroom and other areas of the apartment, but Madeline was nowhere to be found. Noticing that the window in the children's room was open and the blinds raised, Kate ran back to the restaurant in panic, shouting, "They've taken her! They've taken Madeline!" The search began immediately. Jerry and the family's friends searched the resort grounds and nearby streets. Ocean Club staff were notified, and some joined the search. At 10:10, the resort's reception manager called the police. Local officers from the Guardia Nacional Republicana, GNR, arrived at the scene around 11 o'clock. By midnight, about 60 people were already working at the scene, including police officers, resort staff, and volunteers. However, there was no organized, systematic search during the first critical hours, which later became a subject of criticism regarding the investigation. The first hours after Madeline's disappearance were marked by chaos and a lack of clear protocol. The local GNR police, who arrived first, had no experience with such cases and did not immediately recognize the seriousness of the situation. The police questioned the parents and their friends, examined the apartment, but did not take immediate action to block roads or check nearby buildings. Portugal's investigative police, Polícia Judiciária, PJ, responsible for investigating serious crimes, was notified, but their team arrived at the scene only the following morning. On the night of the disappearance, searches were conducted spontaneously and in an unorganized manner. Resort staff, tourists, and some local residents searched the Ocean Club grounds, neighboring streets, and the beach with flashlights. Kate and Jerry McCann, in a state of shock, also participated in the search, often stopping to call out for their daughter. Critically important procedures, such as isolating the crime scene to preserve possible evidence, were not properly executed. Many people moved through apartment 5A during the night, which subsequently seriously complicated the collection of forensic evidence. Photographs and examination of the scene were only conducted the following day. By the morning of May 4th, information about Madeline's disappearance began to spread among the local population and tourists. The first volunteers appeared, distributing flyers with the girl's photograph. Ocean Club organized more structured searches involving their staff, checking every building in the complex and the surrounding areas. During May 4th, additional resources were mobilized. Search groups with dogs examined the area within a radius of several kilometers. Divers checked the harbor and coastal waters. A border patrol helicopter conducted aerial surveillance. The British consulate in Portugal was notified about the disappearance of a British citizen and sent representatives to assist the family. The first contacts with British authorities were established through the consulate. In the first 24 hours, statements were collected from witnesses, including tapas restaurant staff, Ocean Club reception workers, and tourists staying nearby. Particular attention was drawn to the testimony of Jane Tanner, who claimed she saw a man carrying a child near the McCann's apartment around 9:15 on the evening of the disappearance. By the end of the first day, the story of Madeleine's disappearance had reached an international level. British media quickly picked up the news, sending journalists to Praia da Luz. The first publications appeared with a photograph of the smiling 3-year-old girl, which marked the beginning of an unprecedented media campaign. The official investigation into Madeleine's disappearance was assigned to the Polícia Judiciária, PJ, the investigative unit of the Portuguese police. Initially, the case was led by Inspector Gonçalo Amaral from the regional PJ office in Portimão. From the very beginning, the investigation was complicated by several factors. First, the critically important first hours were lost due to the slow response of the authorities. Second, the crime scene was not properly isolated, leading to contamination of potential evidence. Third, there were language and cultural barriers between the Portuguese investigators and British citizens. PJ investigators conducted a detailed examination of apartment 5A, collected fingerprints and DNA samples. All Ocean Club employees working that day were interviewed, as well as tourists staying in neighboring apartments. The police compiled a list of all vehicles in the area and all individuals with criminal backgrounds living nearby. One of the early directions of the investigation was checking information about possible pedophiles in the region. Several years before Madeleine's disappearance, there had been several incidents in the Algarve where intruders broke into vacation homes to watch sleeping children or even molest them. The police considered the possibility that Madeleine might have fallen victim to such a criminal. In mid-May 2007, Robert Murat, a British-Portuguese businessman living with his mother in a villa approximately 150 meters from the site of Madeleine's disappearance, was declared the first official suspect, arguido. Suspicions about Murat were based on his excessive interest in the case and some contradictions in his testimony. However, despite a thorough investigation, including a search of his home and an examination of his computers, no direct evidence of his involvement was found. In July 2007, the investigation received new momentum after British search specialists were brought in. 2 dogs, one trained to detect cadaver odor and another specializing in detecting traces of blood, were used to examine apartment 5A, the car rented by the McCanns, and their personal belongings. The dogs signaled at several locations in the apartment and in the trunk of the car. Subsequent analysis of samples collected from the locations marked by the dogs, conducted by the British Forensic Science Service (FSS), revealed an incomplete DNA profile which was reported to have a high degree of match with Madeleine's DNA, but the results were considered inconclusive due to degradation and mixing of samples. In August 2007, the investigation took a dramatic turn. Based on the results of the dog examinations, contradictions in the testimonies of the parents and their friends, and other circumstantial evidence, PJ investigators began to consider the possibility that the parents themselves might be involved in their daughter's disappearance. On September 7, 2007, Kate and Gerry McCann were declared official suspects. The main theory of the Portuguese police was that Madeleine might have accidentally died in the apartment, possibly from an overdose of sleeping medication or as a result of a fall, after which the parents concealed the body and staged a kidnapping. However, no direct evidence supporting this theory was ever found. The investigation continued but faced growing international pressure and media criticism. In October 2007, Gonçalo Amaral was removed from the case after his public statements criticizing the British police. He was replaced by Paulo Rebelo, who initiated a review of all collected evidence. Madeleine McCann's disappearance quickly attracted unprecedented media attention, becoming one of the most covered news stories of the decade. The day after the disappearance, British journalists began arriving in Praia da Luz, and soon their number grew to hundreds. In the first weeks, the coverage was mostly sympathetic to the McCann family. A photograph of the smiling Madeleine with her characteristic eye defect appeared on the front pages of newspapers worldwide. Kate and Gerry actively engaged with the press, understanding that media coverage could help in the search for their daughter. To organize the search campaign, the Find Madeleine Fund was created on May 15, 2007. The fund raised significant resources to finance searches, an information campaign, and private investigations. Many celebrities, including J.K. Rowling, Richard Branson, and David Beckham, supported the fund and called on the public to help. The Find Madeline campaign received unprecedented international support. Posters with the girl's image were distributed throughout Europe and beyond. Information stands were set up at airports and train stations. Soccer players, musicians, and other celebrities called for help in the search. Pope Benedict XVI even blessed a photograph of Madeline during an audience with the McCanns. However, by the end of summer 2007, the tone of media coverage began to change, especially after Kate and Jerry were named as suspects. British tabloids, which had previously supported the family, now published speculative articles implying their guilt. Some publications went so far as to directly accuse the McCanns of involvement in their daughter's death. This led to one of the most dramatic examples of media harassment in the history of the British press. Kate and Jerry became the objects of daily attacks based on leaks, half-truths, and outright fabrications. In 2008, some of the most aggressive tabloids, including the Express and Star, were forced to publish apologies and pay significant sums as compensation for defamation. In the Portuguese media, coverage also took a negative turn regarding the McCanns. Substantial cultural differences in the perception of the case were evident in how Portuguese and British journalists interpreted the same facts. Portuguese public opinion was generally more skeptical of the abduction version and more receptive to the official line of investigation by the local police. The Madeline McCann case became a prime example of both the positive and negative influence of the media on an investigation. On one hand, international coverage helped spread information about the missing girl and attract resources to the search. On the other hand, media pressure, leaks, and speculation seriously hampered the work of investigators and had a devastating impact on the family and witnesses. Over the years of the Madeline McCann investigation, the circle of suspects expanded, narrowed, and changed. Some figures remained at the center of attention for a long time, while others appeared and disappeared from the investigators' radar. The first official suspect was Robert Murat, a British-Portuguese citizen living near the Ocean Club. Murat attracted attention by actively showing interest in the investigation and offering his services as a translator to the police and journalists. On May 14, 2007, he was detained and questioned. His house was searched, and his computers were seized for examination. Suspicions regarding Murat were based largely on the testimony of Jane Tanner and the suspicions of journalist Laurie Campbell, who noticed his strange behavior. However, despite an intensive investigation, no direct evidence of Murat's involvement in Madeline's disappearance was found. In July 2008, his status as a suspect was officially lifted, and later he successfully sued several British newspapers for defamation. Other early suspects were Sergei Paulo Ribeiro and Marcelo Rodriguez, two local residents with mental health issues who were seen by some witnesses in the Ocean Club area on the night of the disappearance. Both were questioned and excluded from the list of suspects due to lack of evidence. A turning point in the investigation came when Kate and Jerry McCann were declared official suspects on September 7, 2007. This decision by the Portuguese police was based on several circumstantial pieces of evidence: the sniffer dog data, some inconsistencies in the Tapas 9 testimonies, the absence of clear signs of break-in at the apartment, and the inconclusive results of DNA analysis from the car. The theory of PJ investigators suggested that Madeline might have accidentally died in the apartment, possibly from an overdose of sedatives that the parents might have given her to sleep, or as a result of a fall, after which the parents concealed the body and staged a kidnapping. However, no direct evidence supporting this theory was ever found, and in July 2008, the McCann's status as suspects was lifted. In subsequent years, the investigation repeatedly returned to examining various persons of interest spotted in the Praia da Luz area during the period of the disappearance. Particular attention was paid to reports of men who were allegedly observing the McCann's apartment in the days preceding the disappearance, as well as a series of burglaries in tourist apartments in the region that occurred around the same time. In 2013, during Operation Grange conducted by Scotland Yard, a new theory was put forward. Madeline might have been the victim of a planned burglary that escalated into an abduction. The police published composite portraits of several men whom witnesses had seen in the Ocean Club area on May 3, 2007, and called on the public to help identify them. Between 2014 and 2017, Portuguese and British police questioned more than 600 people, including former Ocean Club employees, individuals with criminal backgrounds living in the area, and potential witnesses. However, these efforts did not lead to a breakthrough in the investigation. Forensic evidence played a central but controversial role in the investigation of the Madeleine McCann case. The collection and interpretation of this evidence became the subject of disputes among experts and criticism from the media. A key problem was that the forensic examination of apartment 5A was conducted only 24 hours after the disappearance. During this time, dozens of people had passed through the apartment, including parents, friends, resort staff, police officers, and volunteers, which significantly complicated the identification of significant clues. The initial examination of the crime scene revealed several important details. It was discovered that the window shutter in the room where the children slept had been raised, and the window was partially open. However, no fingerprints were found on the frame or shutter except those belonging to Kate McCann, which cast doubt on the version of entry through the window. Fingerprints collected in the apartment mainly belonged to the residents, service personnel, and police officers. No fingerprints that could be linked to an unidentified perpetrator were found. A turning point in the collection of forensic evidence came with the use of specially trained sniffer dogs from the United Kingdom in late July 2007. Martin Grime, an experienced dog handler, brought 2 dogs. Eddie, trained to find the scent of corpses, and Keela, specializing in detecting traces of blood. The dogs examined apartment 5A, the McCann's car, rented by them 25 days after the disappearance, their personal belongings, and the residence of other suspects. In the apartment, Eddie signaled at several locations: behind the sofa in the living room, in the parents' bedroom, in the garden, and on Kate's clothing. Keela marked some of the same spots in the area around the window in the children's room. In the trunk of the rented car, both dogs also signaled. After the dog alerts, samples were taken from the marked areas for further DNA analysis at the British Forensic Science Service, FSS. The results were ambiguous. In samples taken from the apartment, 15 out of 19 of Madeleine's DNA markers were found, and in samples from the car trunk, 15 out of 37 markers. These results were not considered conclusive due to the small quantity and degradation of the material. The interpretation of this evidence became a subject of serious disagreement. Portuguese investigators believe that the dog's reactions, combined with the incomplete DNA matches, indicated the possibility of Madeleine's death in the apartment and subsequent movement of the body in the car. However, FSS experts evaluated the results more cautiously, pointing to the possibility of contamination and the inconclusiveness of the available data. Subsequent examinations and analyses failed to provide definitive answers. Disputes about the scientific reliability and interpretation of the dog evidence and DNA test results continue to this day, with many experts noting that the data obtained is too ambiguous to form specific conclusions. Dissatisfied with the course of the official investigation, the McCanns directed a significant portion of the Find Madeleine Fund resources to finance private investigations. Over the years following their daughter's disappearance, they hired several detective agencies that worked in parallel with the official investigation, and sometimes contrary to it. The first private agency hired by the McCanns in May 2007 was Control Risks Group, a British firm specializing in security consultations. They provided initial recommendations on actions to take in a child abduction situation and advice on interactions with Portuguese authorities. In September 2007, after the parents were named as suspects, Método 3, a detective agency from Barcelona, led by Francisco Marco, was hired. The agency received a 6-month contract worth about £50,000 per month. Marco publicly stated that his team was close to finding Madeleine, and even promised to return her to her parents by Christmas 2007, which subsequently proved to be empty promises. Método 3 focused on the abduction theory and worked primarily in Spain and Morocco, based on numerous reports of sightings of a girl resembling Madeleine in these countries. Despite bold statements, the agency could not provide any concrete results, and their contract was not renewed after March 2008. The next stage involved bringing in British detective Kevin Halligan, a former MI5 employee who was hired in April 2008, along with his agency, Oakley International. This contract, worth £500,000 for 6 months, was the most significant private investigation. Halligan and his team created a detailed database of all available information, re-interviewed key witnesses, and analyzed telephone data in the Praia da Luz area at the time of the disappearance. One of Halligan's main contributions was bringing in facial recognition experts who analyzed a photograph of a man with a child taken by a Spanish tourist in Morocco. This helped rule out a potential lead, as it turned out that the photo showed a local farmer with his own daughter. In 2009, the McCanns hired former Scotland Yard detectives Dave Edgar and Arthur Cowley, who worked at Alpha Investigations Group. This phase of the investigation focused on confidential information received about a leading Australian lead, a woman from Barcelona who allegedly knew something about Madeleine's fate. Despite public appeals for this woman to come forward, she was never identified. Unlike the official investigators, the private detectives hired by the McCanns almost exclusively focused on the abduction theory. They followed up on numerous reported sightings of Madeleine from around the world and tried to find a connection between her disappearance and known child trafficking networks. Although private investigations could not find Madeleine or provide definitive answers about her fate, they played an important role in maintaining public interest in the case and finding new leads. Some of the investigation lines initiated by private detectives were later incorporated into Scotland Yard's official investigation. British law enforcement agencies were involved in the Madeleine McCann case from the very beginning, although their role significantly evolved over time. Initially, their participation was limited to providing advisory assistance to their Portuguese colleagues. As early as May 4, 2007, the day after the disappearance, Leicestershire Police, from the McCann's area of residence, began coordinating British support for the investigation. Liaison officers were sent to Portugal to assist with translation and administrative matters. Over the following weeks, the British presence expanded. Forensic experts from the United Kingdom arrived to consult with their Portuguese colleagues. Resources were also mobilized to process information coming through hotlines in the United Kingdom. However, full-fledged cooperation was complicated by differences in the legal systems of the two countries, the language barrier, and different approaches to investigation. The situation became particularly acute in August-September 2007, when the Portuguese police began developing a theory about the possible involvement of the parents in their daughter's disappearance. After Kate and Gerry McCann were given suspect status, diplomatic pressure from the United Kingdom intensified. It was known that Prime Minister Gordon Brown personally took an interest in the investigation and communicated with Portuguese leadership. However, the real turning point came in May 2011, when, after a personal appeal from the McCanns to Prime Minister David Cameron, Operation Grange was launched, a full-scale Scotland Yard investigation to review the Madeleine case. An initial budget of £2 million was allocated for this operation, which was subsequently increased multiple times. The Operation Grange team, led by Detective Chief Inspector Andy Redwood, started with a clean slate, reviewing all evidence collected by Portuguese police and private detectives. They analyzed more than 40,000 documents, re-interviewed key witnesses, and developed new theories. In October 2013, Redwood presented the first significant results of Operation Grange in a special edition of the BBC program Crime Watch. He announced a truly cardinal shift in the investigation. Several composite portraits of men whom witnesses had seen in the Ocean Club area on May 3, 2007 were presented, and it was reported that a previous key lead, Jane Tanner's testimony about a man carrying a child, had been ruled out. Investigators established that this was an innocent tourist returning with his daughter from the kids' club. The Operation Grange investigation focused on several theories, including a planned abduction, a burglary gone wrong, and an abduction in response to publicity about the children being left unattended. Scotland Yard officers repeatedly visited Portugal, conducted local examinations, and coordinated actions with their Portuguese colleagues. In 2014, Portuguese authorities, partly under pressure from the United Kingdom, reopened their investigation. Joint efforts included extensive searches in the vicinity of Praia da Luz in the summer of 2014, including the use of ground-penetrating radar and sniffer dogs. However, these searches did not yield significant results. By 2017, Operation Grange, having consumed more than £11 million, was significantly scaled back due to budget constraints. The number of officers working on the case was reduced from 29 to 4. Nevertheless, the investigation continued to receive additional funding on a 6-month basis. Over the years of investigating Madeline's disappearance, hundreds of witness testimonies were collected, and dozens of potential leads were identified. Some of these played a key role in shaping various directions of the investigation. One of the most well-known testimonies came from Jane Tanner, a member of the Tapas 9. She claimed that around 9:15 on May 3, 2007, while going to check on her children, she saw a man carrying a child in pajamas crossing the road near the McCann's apartment. This testimony was long considered key, as the alleged sighting time coincided with the presumed time of the abduction. However, in 2013, Operation Grange investigators identified this person as an innocent British tourist returning with his daughter from the Evening Kids Club. The testimony of the Smith family from Ireland later proved more important. Around 10 o'clock on the night of the disappearance, they saw a man carrying a child heading toward the beach. Martin Smith subsequently claimed that the man's gait reminded him of Jerry McCann, although he wasn't completely certain of the identification. Also significant was the testimony of Mary and Jennifer Mooring, who stayed in apartments on the same street. They reported that in the days before the disappearance, they saw a man watching the McCann's apartment. Similar reports of suspicious persons around the Ocean Club came from other witnesses as well. Much attention was drawn to the testimony of Carrie Smith, an Ocean Club employee, who claimed that at around 9:15 she saw a suspicious couple observing apartment 5A from the street. According to her, the couple quickly left when they noticed they had been spotted. In 2013, as part of Operation Grange, special attention was paid to a series of break-ins that occurred in the Praia da Luz area in 2007 to 2008. 12 cases were identified where an intruder entered tourist apartments through windows, with several cases involving sexual assaults on sleeping children. These cases were considered potentially linked to Madeline's disappearance. Analysis of telephone data also revealed interesting leads. Scotland Yard discovered that an increased number of calls between several mobile phones was recorded in the Ocean Club area on the night of the disappearance. These phones belonged to individuals who subsequently attracted the attention of investigators, including Christian Bruckner. An important aspect of the investigation was the timeline analysis of events. According to testimonies, Madeline was seen alive at the kids' club at 5:30. Jerry confirms that he saw her sleeping during his check at 9:05. At 10 o'clock, Kate discovered that her daughter was missing. Thus, the time window for the abduction was approximately 55 minutes, from 9:05 to 10 o'clock. This period became the focus for collecting and analyzing witness testimonies. Many of the key testimonies and leads contained contradictions or were subject to problems with human memory and perception. For example, descriptions of suspicious persons often differed in details, and the temporal sequence of events was difficult to reconstruct due to discrepancies in witness testimonies. In June 2020, the investigation took an unexpected turn when German police and prosecutors publicly announced a new main suspect, 43-year-old German citizen Christian Bruckner, who was already serving a prison sentence in Germany for other crimes. Bruckner had a long history of criminal behavior, including sexual crimes against children and numerous cases of burglary. From 1995 to 2007, he regularly lived and worked in the Praia da Luz area, engaging in various odd jobs, including restaurant service and allegedly breaking into tourist apartments to steal valuables. German investigators stated they had evidence that Bruckner was in the Ocean Club area on the night of Madeline's disappearance. Phone data analysis showed that his mobile phone was registered to a cell tower serving the Praia da Luz area around the time when the girl disappeared. Of additional interest was Bruckner's vehicle, an old Volkswagen T3 Westphalia, in which he presumably could have transported the kidnapped child. This vehicle was transferred to a new owner shortly after Madeline's disappearance. The German prosecution stated they had concrete evidence that Madeleine was dead, although this evidence was not publicly disclosed. Chief Prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters repeatedly stated that they were convinced of Bruckner's guilt, but acknowledged that the available evidence was not yet sufficient to bring charges for this specific crime. One of the key witnesses against Bruckner, his former friend Helga Busching, claimed that the suspect had hinted at his involvement in Madeleine's disappearance in a private conversation. According to Busching, during a video chat in 2008, Bruckner allegedly said, "She didn't scream," when Busching mentioned the McCann case. In 2022, Portuguese prosecutors officially declared Bruckner a formal suspect, arguido, an important legal step, partly related to the fact that the Portuguese statute of limitations for murder cases is 15 years, and the 15th anniversary of the disappearance was approaching. Despite the seriousness of the suspicions, Bruckner, through his lawyers, categorically denied any involvement in Madeleine's disappearance. His defenders pointed to the lack of direct evidence linking him to the missing girl. The investigation regarding Bruckner continued, with coordination between German, Portuguese, and British authorities. In 2023, an extensive examination of the Barragem do Arado reservoir, approximately 50 kilometers from Praia da Luz, where Bruckner was known to have spent time, was conducted. The search included the use of ground-penetrating radar, sniffer dogs, and divers, but did not yield any significant findings. While German prosecutors maintained confidence in Bruckner's guilt, British police remained more cautious in their public statements, emphasizing that the investigation was ongoing and all possible versions were being considered. The Madeleine McCann case generated numerous legal processes spanning several countries and various aspects of law. These proceedings included not only the criminal investigation, but also civil lawsuits, defamation cases, and international legal disputes. After Kate and Gerry McCann officially had their suspect status lifted in July 2008, they initiated a series of lawsuits against British tabloids for defamatory publications. In March 2008, the Express and Star newspapers published unprecedented front-page apologies and paid £550,000 in compensation to the Find Madeleine Fund. Other successful lawsuits against various publications followed. One of the longest and most complex legal processes was the McCann's lawsuit against Gonçalo Amaral, the former lead investigator who published a book titled The Truth of the Lie, A Verdade da Mentira, after being removed from the case. In this book, published in 2008, Amaral claimed that Madeleine died in apartment 5A, and her parents concealed the body and staged a kidnapping. In 2009, the McCanns filed a lawsuit against Amaral, demanding a ban on the book and compensation of €1.2 million. In 2015, a Portuguese court ruled in favor of the McCanns, ordering Amaral to pay €500,000 in compensation. However, in 2016, this decision was overturned by an appeals court, and in 2017, Portugal's Supreme Court ultimately sided with Amaral, citing freedom of expression. The McCanns appealed to the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR, arguing that the Portuguese court's decision violated their right to respect for private life and the presumption of innocence. In September 2022, the ECHR ruled against the McCanns, stating that their reputation should not take precedence over Amaral's freedom of expression. Another significant legal aspect concerned the funding of Operation Grange. The UK government's decision to allocate millions of pounds to investigate the disappearance of one child sparked debates about the distribution of law enforcement resources. Critics pointed out that other missing children cases did not receive the same attention and funding. From a legal perspective, the Madeleine McCann case also raised complex questions about jurisdiction and international cooperation in crime investigation. Portuguese, British, and German legislation have differences in investigation procedures, evidence requirements, and statutes of limitations, which complicated coordination efforts. In Portuguese law, the statute of limitations for murder cases is 15 years, which created additional pressure on investigators before the 15th anniversary of the disappearance in May 2022. This partly explains the Portuguese prosecution's decision to declare Christian Bruckner an official suspect shortly before this date, effectively suspending the statute of limitations. Despite numerous legal proceedings, the main legal question establishing what happened to Madeline and who is responsible for her disappearance remains unresolved. Evidence sufficient to press charges and prosecute any suspect has still not been gathered. Madeline McCann's disappearance had a profound psychological impact, not only on her family, but also on the broader society. This case highlighted a number of psychological and social phenomena related to our perception of crimes, media coverage, and parenting. For Kate and Jerry McCann, the loss of their daughter was a devastating experience, exacerbated by unprecedented media attention and public accusations. In her book, Madeline, published in 2011, Kate described deep depression, feelings of guilt, and suicidal thoughts she experienced after her daughter's disappearance. The family sought psychological help and support through the Catholic Church to cope with the trauma. Particularly difficult for the parents was the period when they were under suspicion. Kate described how they felt doubly punished, first by the loss of their daughter, and then by accusations of involvement in this loss. The struggle to clear their name became almost as important to them as the search for Madeline. The twins, Sean and Amelie, who were only 2 years old at the time of their sister's disappearance, grew up with an awareness of her absence and the ongoing search. The McCanns strived to provide them with as normal a childhood as possible, despite the unusual circumstances. The children received help from child psychologists and had access to age-appropriate information about what happened to their sister. On a broader social level, the Madeleine case triggered a wave of parental fears and increased vigilance. Many families reassessed their approaches to children's safety during vacations and in everyday life. Some resorts and hotels changed their security protocols and childcare services in response to this case. Media coverage and public reaction to Madeline's disappearance demonstrated an interesting psychological phenomenon, where the audience divided into two camps: those who unconditionally supported the McCanns and those who suspected their involvement. Psychologists note that such polarization often occurs in high-profile cases, where the public feels a need for certainty and closure. Cultural differences also played a role in the perception of the case. In Portugal, where cultural norms and expectations regarding childcare differ from those in the United Kingdom, many condemned the McCanns' decision to leave their children unattended. In the United Kingdom, public opinion was more divided, although criticism of the parents' practice of checking on children at intervals increased over time. In Praia da Luz and the Algarve region, Madeline's disappearance had significant economic and social impacts. The tourism business temporarily suffered due to negative associations. Local residents described feelings of stigmatization and injustice when their community became known only for this tragedy. The Madeline case also illustrates the missing white woman syndrome, disproportionately high media attention given to cases of missing attractive white women and girls compared to missing persons of other demographics. Sociologists and media critics point out that cases involving children from minority groups or less privileged social backgrounds rarely receive comparable coverage. The lasting impact of the case can be seen in how it changed protocols for handling missing children cases internationally. Many countries strengthened cooperation mechanisms between law enforcement agencies, developed more effective alert systems, and improved protocols for rapid response. The case also led to discussions about media responsibility in covering sensitive cases involving children. For the McCanns themselves, the continuing search for their daughter became a defining aspect of their lives. Despite the emotional toll, they maintained extraordinary resilience and determination in their quest for answers. Their experience also led them to become advocates for missing children and child safety issues more broadly. The case holds a unique place in collective memory and continues to evoke strong emotions and opinions. The inability to solve the mystery, despite enormous resources and attention, speaks to human limitations in the face of certain types of uncertainty and to our deep psychological need for resolution and answers, especially in cases involving the vulnerability of children.